Boston's 400-year-old ultimatum number ## Boston's 400-year-old ultimatum intro. A shining city on a hill. It's a phrase that echoes through American history, a symbol of hope and citadalism. Presidents from Kennedy to Reagan have used it to define America's role in the world. We picture brave Puritans landing on a wild shore, determined to build a beacon of freedom for all humankind. But what if the man who first spoke those words wasn't making a promise, but delivering a threat? What if his beautiful vision was actually a terrifying ultimatum? This is the story of how the intense pressure to create a perfect, godly society with the eyes of the entire world watching forged Boston in a crucible of fear. It's how an idealistic dream led to some of the strictest laws in American history, leaving a legacy we're still grappling with 400 years later. Section 1. The Setup. A Broken England. To understand the pressure cooker that was early Boston, you have to understand what the Puritans were running from. This wasn't just a trip for religious freedom. It was an escape from what they saw as total, systemic failure. In their eyes, 17th century England was a nation spiraling into corruption and divine punishment. The Church of England, which was supposed to be the country's bedrock, still felt far too Catholic for their tastes. Priests were often illiterate, and King Charles I was openly hostile to their calls for reform. The Puritans believed they had a sacred contract with God, a covenant. Do right by him, and he blesses you. Break the rules, and he punishes you. And looking around England, they saw rules being broken everywhere. They saw what a society that dealt falsely with God looked like, and it terrified them. So, their Great Migration wasn't just about finding a place to pray freely. It was a desperate last-ditch effort to get it right. They weren't just colonists, they were refugees from a failed state that had broken its covenant with God. This was their last chance to build a society that would please him. The stakes weren't just land or money, they were their very souls. Section 2. The Inciting Incident. The Arbella Compact. The year is 1630. A fleet of ships, carrying around 700 souls, bobs in the cold Atlantic. On the flagship, the Arbella, the colony's governor, John Winthrop, gathers the weary passengers. They aren't on a vacation, they're on a divine mission. And Winthrop needs every single person to understand the terrifyingly high stakes. He delivers a sermon that would echo for centuries, a model of Christian charity. In it, he lays out the blueprint for their survival. He tells them they must be knit together in this work as one man, sharing each other's burdens and putting the community's welfare far above any personal desire. Then, he delivers the ultimatum. He says, "For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us." Today, we hear that as a boast. But on that ship in 1630, it was a terrifying warning. Winthrop was telling them there was nowhere to hide. Failure would be a very public affair. He spells out the consequences with chilling clarity, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. If they failed, they wouldn't just be another Roanoke or Jamestown. They would become a global cautionary tale, a punchline that shamed God and proved their enemies right. Their failure would curse them, and they would perish out of the good land. This wasn't a pep talk, it was a contract signed in fear. To them, God's wrath wasn't a metaphor, it was a shipwreck, a failed harvest, a deadly disease, and the eyes of the world were just waiting for them to stumble. The pressure was on. Section 3. Forging the City. The Puritan Pressure Cooker. When the Puritans landed, that sermon became the operating manual for the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The ultimatums succeed and be blessed, or fail and be a global disgrace was woven into the very fabric of their laws. Here, the line between God's law and man's law basically didn't exist. The government's main job was to enforce the covenant, and since one person's sin could endanger the entire community, every part of life was strictly regulated. Missing church on Sunday wasn't just lazy. It was a finable offense that threatened the whole colony. The laws were famously strict, often pulled directly from the Old Testament. Blasphemy could get you killed. Adultery was a capital crime, and at least 2 people were executed for it. Even a child could, in theory, be put to death for cursing their parents. There's a famous, if possibly exaggerated story about a Captain Kimball who returned from a 3-year voyage, kissed his wife on their own doorstep, and was promptly put in the stocks for 2 hours for his lewd and unseemly behavior. This wasn't just about keeping things orderly, it was about collective survival. The logic was simple and terrifying. If your neighbor sins, God might punish the whole town. Therefore, your neighbor's morality is absolutely your business. This created an atmosphere where neighbors watched neighbors, all held together by an iron will. One tear in the fabric could unravel everything. The pressure to conform wasn't just social, it was existential. CTA, this intricate system, was designed to build a perfect society, but it had zero tolerance for error. And when you build a pressure cooker, it's only a matter of time before it boils over. Now let's see what happened when people started to push back. Section 4. The climax. The crucible boils over. A system this rigid is bound to create dissent. And in Massachusetts Bay, dissent wasn't just a disagreement. It was a direct threat to the covenant, a crack in the foundation that could bring the whole experiment crashing down. Enter Anne Hutchinson. A wife, mother of 15, and a popular midwife, Hutchinson was brilliant, charismatic, and deeply religious. She started holding meetings in her Boston home to discuss the week's sermons, which was normal enough at first. But soon, Hutchinson began offering her own interpretations, suggesting that a person could know God directly, without needing a minister in the middle. Two leaders like Governor Winthrop, this was spiritual dynamite. She was questioning the authority of the very people tasked with upholding the covenant. If anyone could get direct revelation from God, the whole top-down structure of church and state could become irrelevant. She was put on trial for heresy. During the proceedings, a furious Winthrop told her she had been more a husband than a wife and a preacher than a hearer. The court declared her a woman not fit for our society and banished her from the colony in 1637, and she wasn't the only one. Roger Williams, a minister who argued for separating church and state and dealing fairly with Native Americans, was also exiled. The system couldn't afford freethinkers. The fear of God's wrath meant any challenge to the established order had to be surgically removed. The city upon a hill had to be pure, and that meant expelling its dissenters with the same fervor it punished its sinners. Conclusion: a lasting legacy. So, did the Puritans succeed? In many ways, yes. They didn't perish. They built a stable, prosperous, and famously literate society, but it all came at a tremendous cost. The city upon a hill was built, but its foundations were laid with anxiety and an intolerance born from that 400-year-old ultimatum. The vision of creating a perfect society for the world to emulate became a core part of the American identity, the engine for what we call American acceptance. But over the centuries, as the city on a hill phrase was quoted again and again, the context was stripped away. We remembered the inspiring image but forgot the terrifying warning it came with. We forgot that the eyes of all people were meant to be a source of pressure, not just pride. We forgot the original vision was haunted by the fear of failure. The Puritan legacy is a dual one, a relentless drive to be a beacon for the world, paired with a deep-seated fear that can lead to rigidity and exclusion. The story of Boston's founding is a stark reminder that the brightest ideals can cast the darkest shadows, and the pressure to be perfect can create a society that is anything but. That tension, embedded in the American soul right from the start, is something we still feel today.